Hello and welcome to the Breaking Free podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Francis. And so I'm very grateful and very humbly joined by Adrian D'Amico again. I interviewed Adrian start of the year, I think. It was a long time ago now. Lots changed, especially with me and you. And it's just awesome to have you back on for another chat. For those that aren't aware, Adrian's a coach too. He's lived a very interesting life as well, as we all have post 2020. I'll let Adrian discuss a little bit of that. I found Adrian's podcast just the day after I quit alcohol. He interviewed my mentor, Jason Christoph, and that set me off on the path of self-discovery. So Adrian, welcome back. It's good to have you back here again at the end of the year now. What's been going on and how you going? And let's have a chat.
It does seem like a long time ago since we did this the last time. I can't remember when it was, but I was looking back just before we got on air and had a look at it. So it was good. I like your story too. I think I was just mentioning before that there was your situation where you were going through some stuff, and then you saw that interview that I did with Jason Christoph, who's like just a fucking great guy and a wealth of knowledge. And you did his training, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting. It's like it's that whole kind of ripple that touches the shores sort of thing, So I think it's a really cool story. How's your coaching going?
Yeah, it's going good, man. Helping the youth and the young adults, and it just this information that he taught me is so powerful. And then to add in like the spiritual component as well, it's just it's completely transformed me. And then to see the growth in other people and like young people too, it's pretty wild. Like just I could say like 2 or 3 things to them, and then they'll just switch back on. Like something inside will just turn on. Like I had a client the other week where we're sitting in this little park. She's like, "Oh, my mother's here." I'm like, "Yeah, she's definitely here." And then I said like 3 things about like forgiveness and stuff, and then she saw her and gave her a hug. It's just like the most beautiful thing, man. So cool. Yeah, it's wild.
How do you find it with the teens and things like that in terms of them opening up or like at least having the awareness that there's some sabotaging habits and things like that they want to work on? Do you find is it a harder bridge to gap in terms of getting stuff out of them, or like how do you do that?
Well, the ones that have come to me have been like ready, like they're ready for what we're about to do over the 2 or 3 sessions. And these souls, man, they're in tune and they know things. Like I just had a feeling, and I had a confirmation that these souls that are born after 2000 are like they're going to change the world. And that's why all the video games and the porn and stuff's here, the alcohol and all this stuff, the vape, to distract them from ever going within to realize how powerful they are. And for me to be able to help them remember that, it's the most beautiful thing, man. And and it's just, and some of them, it's just helping them understand why they're doing these things, and they're not broken. They're just functioning as designed. It's just reminding them of that, that they're doing all these things just, to fit in and to, blend in and to please everyone else. And it's just helping them understand, get that conscious awareness that, then it's not really them at heart. And it's helping them rediscover that. It's pretty cool, man. Especially the conversations I have too. I can just ask the question, plant the seed, and then just watch it grow.
Yeah, sure. Is there a common theme in terms of challenges with teens, do you find, Nathan, or is it sort of very varied in terms of their...
A lot of it's childhood. And I know with me it was too. And a lot of it's inside that school system. Someone told them in there that they can't do something and they can't be a certain way. They have to be this way. That really destroys a child, hearing that. Because I know I was told it too. And it destroyed me until I went back to that child and went, mate, you can do and be anything. That's one person's perspective of what you can be. Hearing that, telling myself that, mate, set me off on Pandora's box just went ping.
Yeah, I think like any kind of adult influence would be a challenge. Like there's certain parents that are self-aware, and there's others that aren't. And I think when you have the disconnection on either side, like I know when from like speaking as a parent, you can sort of see things within your children that you want to improve upon them, but they aren't in the headspace to acknowledge it or want to deal with it, or perhaps they've got some their own limiting beliefs and things like that. And it's a challenge in terms of trying to penetrate their minds enough to help them understand that there are certain things that they can do in order to change. But then it would be the same on the opposite side, which is what you would experience. So when I'm coaching clients and customers that come to me for various reasons, when we tend to work on their spirituality and their personal development and their mindset and personal growth and things like that, inevitably, because a lot of them are parents, they come up with challenges around their children, whether they're teens or even young adults. And I always tell them to work on themselves first, and then their behavior will start to reflect in their children.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from your perspective, it'd be interesting to hear from you, like when you've got a teenager who's self-aware and realizes that there's the system and there's things that don't tend to really fit in, and the world's trying to almost let them be a square peg in a round hole, and they're trying to mold them into something that the system wants them to be, or society wants them to be, and they realize that, but then parents are caught in the system as well. So that would be really hard for a teenager or a young adult to kind of experience.
100%. And it was tough for me as a young adult too, going through my journey as well. And I can definitely relate, because you do all this work on yourself, and then like people around you aren't really think you're crazy, think you're woo-woo and sort of stuff. But yeah, it can be quite challenging. But it's having those people around you that are your way inclined, that just through your vibration or energy come into your life, and it's those connections that sort of help get you through that. But with teens though, a lot of teens probably aren't at the moment our way inclined, but there are some out there that are. It's just that exchange, that vibration that we put out there. But yeah, the teen, it can be quite challenging. I know it was for me, being 27 when I started my journey, and a lot of the people around me were drinking, partying, and smoking, and doing all those things, sleeping with girls, and it's like I turned my back on that lifestyle. And yeah, a lot of my friends are a bit older than me, but it's good because they have things that I aspire to have, or they are doing things I aspire to be. So it's like, well, I'm following that instead of what I was doing, And then some of my friends that are a bit younger, well, they're aspiring to do the things I'm doing. So I'm leading them by the friends I have that I'm following. You know what I mean?
You just made a big move, to the sunny coast.
Yes, huge move.
Yeah. What was the catalyst to all of that, in terms of is it an escape from you, or is it just like I needed to get out of this environment, or is it just I've always wanted to live, in a sunny spot?
I can give you the real deep answer. I always just go deep. So the real deep answer is I was always wanting to run away from myself, my pain, my whatever you want to call it, trauma, darkness, dark night of the soul. I always wanted to run away. I always escaped alcohol, escaped women, escaped porn, do all those things, right? And at 2020, when I had that voice in my head just say stop, and I stopped, I still wanted to run. So I tried to move to the UK at the start of 2021 to just escape again, just to go away and teach and be in that system. But spirit had it, I didn't actually end up going. It was time for me to sit and face that side of me and acknowledge it and forgive it and love it and then move forward. It was a fucking hard process though. But then my brother and I went on a journey at the start of last year with Dale. Joy and I, my brother, we came together as brothers. Like, we've been so disconnected for such a long time. Like, we came together in those 4 months and built a really good brothership again, because we were so far apart. So that's a whole nother story as well. And then we came up here and we're like, this is like heaven on earth up here. Like, we could live here. And then we sort of came back to Victoria last year and put the vision board out there, the goals out there of how we wanted to get there, the steps we could take, what it felt like, smelt like, tasted like, did all of that. And then it just in 12 months, it just came into fruition at the end of August, and we just made it happen. It was like supposed to happen. Wasn't running away. I severed all ties back where I was from. parents and family are still down there, but in terms of like I'd severed all ties. I'm 29. I could have stayed down there and just done the same thing for the next 40 years. It's like, well, I want to experience something new, something exciting, new opportunities, new people, new place. And it's like, I'm 29. I'm still young enough to do this. So it's like, just do it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have a girlfriend, don't have a girlfriend, didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have anything keeping me down there. It's like, let's just live life and just experience something new, some new challenges. Huge.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it takes a lot of courage. I really do. I remember being your age, and it sounds funny me saying that. Like, it's just because I'm not that much older than you, but it's at that age. It's I find it interesting to compare where I was at your age. So, and I've had this conversation a bunch, particularly in the last couple of years, because I noticed that a lot of people from your generation are doing things later in life. You know, like I had this conversation not too long ago, and it was a similar thing. I was just like, yeah, at your age, I was already married, and like, you're 29. I already had 2 kids by 29.
Jeepers.
Right. So I mean, by the time I was 30. Sebastian was born in 2006. I would have been 27, 28.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, so 30, 31. 31. Isaac was born. I was already in business. I already had my own business at 27. Right. And so I already bought the house and did the white picket fence thing and all that kind of stuff. So I just feel like, part of my journey at that time was like, I already ticked off a lot of the things that, I don't know, you would normally accomplish these days. I think people are doing that in their mid to, early to mid 30s, maybe, like it's just it's an interesting dynamic.
It is, yeah. And I was heading down that path of like, do I set up roots here where I've lived for all my life, or do I pack up my stuff and experience something new? It's like change. Yeah, I find I guess with the stuff I was talking about, I was talking a lot about change, and I wasn't really changing my environment. So I guess spirit, universe, whatever. It's like, no, if you're going to talk about change, then you need to walk the change. So I started walking the change, mate.
You got to embody what you practice. I think
100%.
that's something that's really missing in today's society. You got a lot of Instagram famous and social media like influencer type people that are getting a lot of notoriety, but when you go scratch like beneath the surface, they don't embody what they teach, or they omit parts of their life for the sake of just having a persona online.
Yeah, and
I think that's a very common thing.
I think you're right, especially with the influencers my age. Like, a lot of the women have their asses out in bikinis. It's just interesting though. Like, you're right. Like, for me, I speak from the heart. It's a heart-centered approach, and it's, I'm not doing it for the followers. I'm doing it to help people my age understand that they're not broken. They're just functioning as designed, and that there's a way out of their whatever they're in. I just try and say things a million different ways so it sinks into different. I say the same thing 100 different ways just to it might resonate with someone else. And it's. So a lot of young people my age, they all, over the last 3 years, they all wanted to get back in the pub and travel. They didn't have the long-term vision that, that this wasn't going to be forever.
But I mean, like, had you not gone down the path of the coaching route and having an influence on the youth and things like that, you would have to replace that desire for meaning and purpose and contribution with something else. And if that something else wasn't there, then by default, you would go to smoking, drinking, porn, women, partying.
Yeah. But it's like when the COVID stuff happened in 2020 and everything stopped, like, that was my time to stop too. And I stopped all right. And I started listening to that voice, and that voice got louder and louder and louder. And yeah, that little voice, that inner voice of mine, well, there's a couple of voices there, but one of them's my own. And to listen to that voice, to then walk that path, yeah, I have no regrets of sitting and just listening. So I was running for so long. Like I'd use alcohol, I'd use porn, like porn was the biggest one, like from 10 years old to 27, 26, 27. That's a lot of sexual programming and a lot of me viewing women as sexual objects for such a long time. And then to change that perspective to be like, well, they birth life. And when man meets woman, that's pretty powerful, like sacred, masculine, feminine. It's like, I never had women friends either. I always had a lot of male friends. Now it's like I got a lot more women friends than ever. And it's sometimes it can be uncomfortable because I'm not used to the feminine energy, but I know that I'm not trying to sleep with them. I'm just wanting to get to know the soul, get to know the person, and just be friends. It's pretty incredible that turnaround happened so fast that I got a lot more women friends in my life at the moment.
Now, what age did you say you started watching porn?
10.
Yeah.
Around about 2006 when the internet porn just started. Like, I remember it. I was sitting in the study of my computer one day. I don't know what I was doing, but a pop-up came up and I'm like, oh, it's like that internet girlfriend was more enticing, especially for a 10-year-old. You know, it was big for me.
I think people underestimate just how early people are exposed to it. So, like, I reckon my earliest exposure to porn would have been maybe 4 or 5.
Jesus.
And so when you think about it in those days, like there's no internet. We didn't dial up to the computer and start searching for websites. So I would have had to have found a VHS. Do you know what a VHS is?
Yeah, video, yeah. Yeah. I love videos, my old joint. Yeah, I know videos.
Oh, okay. I have to ask these days, like some people just don't know what a fucking fax machine is or a Rolodex or those sorts of things.
I'm aware of it, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's the way.
Yeah.
So like I had to discover that in terms of just having like that around the house and then stumbling onto it, those sorts of things. That was my earliest recollection of when I had it. But it's and I've spoken to this with other sex coaches and relationship coaches on the podcast and things like that, and it's kind of how it's how a lot of people over the last 20, 30 years, maybe more, they learned intimacy and sex from porn, which is a pretty disturbing notion.
It wasn't real sex.
No.
And they're just paid actors. Like, you want to go deeper into it, they're probably trafficked. Like, it's not real. It's harnessing the energy of, like, when you're watching it, you're not only, you're probably getting everyone else's stuff spiritually from who else has watched it when you do that. Like, it's all about energy. And I know for me, I've started doing the semen retention, no fat stuff, and that's super powerful. I don't know if you're into the semen retention stuff or you've heard about it, but far out, man. Like,
what's your longest you've gone?
45 days, man.
Nice. And
that energy, like, I just found going to the gym and like I build muscle. It's that energy is so powerful, and men shoot that off into the sheets, into the tissues and stuff on a daily basis. Like, hold on to that energy because that creates life. And if you're not creating or trying to birth life with it, then can't we create and birth our own life with it? So that energy is so powerful. It's about getting it up through the body, through the crown and out into the world. It's interviewing Nakula Das. He might be someone you can have an interview with. I'll hook you up with Nakula. Like, when I interviewed him and found out about semen retention, that set me off on another interesting journey of harnessing that sexual energy and then finally getting out of that porn and letting that resistance longer, because you can't just quit it. For me, I couldn't just quit it. I had to, a couple of days I'd watch it and then stop for a week or two and then I'd go back. But it's like that resistance now, it's much longer than this time last year.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah. I first discovered the notion of not masturbating in terms of energy cultivation and focus and concentration and things like that. Probably more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And at that time it was nothing, it wasn't called semen retention. It was just saying like, if you stop doing this, then you would have increased energy and focus. So that was kind of the start of it then. And again, like weaning yourself off the porn, because it just becomes, it's like any habit that you create. So it's like a cigarette addiction or whatever it is. You just have a motion to go and doing it all the time, and it just becomes a habit. But I think what a lot of men don't realize is that the toxicity of pornography, in terms of how it distorts your perception of what relationship is and what intimacy is, right? And so you're learning how to make love in a fashion that's like, you know, you're fucking your woman like you hate her, right? And so it's very aggressive, and you know, all those sorts of things. And it's not that intimacy and you know, sexual activity and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't have a place for that kind of thing in terms of being dominant or playful, or you know, having that kind of element to it. But I think the come from is very different when you're interpreting the pornography scene. So then when you go a little bit further and you say, well, I'm going to redirect this energy, and now it becomes more of a mind over matter thing, because that habit of going to the screen every time that you want to like get a load off is like, it just becomes, for me, it was like I discovered that the main reason that I was doing it was boredom. It wasn't desire to just be like horny and you know, get one off. It was just because I was bored and there was something to do in that moment. And so that realization for me was an epiphany to a degree, because I was like, hang on a second, if I'm doing it out of boredom, well, then this is just stupid. So when I interviewed a sex coach, Cam Fraser, and he said something to me that was quite profound as well. He was like, most people that are masturbating to porn are masturbating into their women, right? So they're just jacking off real quick, and it's just like a 2-minute high.
Literally.
And I thought, that's an interesting perspective, because if you've conditioned yourself to be that way, then how could you have really deep, long-lasting intimacy and connection? That's the way that you've conditioned yourself to do it. So it's the same with anything. If you go into the gym and you condition yourself to lift light weights for a lot of reps, and you've got more endurance, then I would go into the gym and suffer with that kind of workout, because I'm not conditioned to it. Whereas that person could come and do my workout, which is high intensity, heavy weights and low reps, and they would suffer as a result because their body wasn't conditioned. So the same way that you condition yourself to just sort of like, you know, jack off and it's all done in a minute, then you could like reverse engineer that and get yourself to a point where you could delay things a lot longer. And I think the no fap notion is kind of embodies a lot of that. You're like, I'm not giving into temptation. I'm not giving into just being bored and things like that. And I'm kind of like taking control of my body. And so the question then becomes like, who's mastering my domain? Right? Is it my emotions and feelings and this you know, intention of just getting a load off straight away, or am I in charge of what's going on here? And the more control that you have over that, the more empowering it is. So I found that it wasn't so much like an energy surge or something where I'm like, I'm directing all this energy, and now I'm having a Kundalini experiencing, and I'm fucking jizzing on my brain, and you know, having all this kind of stuff, right? I just found that it made me more in control of my actions. But the fruits of all of that is when you start to channel that and become more mindful, particularly within intimacy. Now it takes on a completely new dynamic, because it takes the focus off me wanting to finish and just be selfish in that respect, to being more like, well, I'm just going to do all of this stuff and put all of my love and affection and attention onto my partner, and then go, hey, like, I'm going to just embody this dynamic here and serve and love and give and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, things are very different. And so it's a truly powerful mindset shift, and the dynamic between focusing your attention on yourself versus focusing something outside of you and controlling all of that. To me, like, it's a game changer in the sense of you really feel like you have the power to control everything that goes on inside of you. And as a guy, like, you would have to agree, to control those sorts of things is not an easy feat. It's not like you can just switch it on and switch it off, and it's like a tap. Like when these sensations come and you're trying to mitigate a lot of those sort of like heightened sensations. I mean, it's a fucking Yoda practice.
It is. And I don't know what it was like for you, but since I first started, like, it brings up a lot of stuff as well. Like, it brings up stuff for me to go back and like heal and deal with. Like, it brings up, like, for me, I found that energy and stuff too, it's just brought up some more emotions, brought up some more stuff to, like, I guess, to help me step into that true potential more. I found going back to some really dark places since I've been doing it. And it's like I've got the strength now to go back to those darker places. It's brought up some stuff too. Having since turned my back on the porn, doing the no-fap seam retention stuff, and it's just brought up more emotional stuff for me to go back and unpack. I found that too.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guilt and shame around that area.
Yes.
So like when you think about watching porn, particularly as a 10-year-old child, there's a lot of shame around that and guilt because you're not meant to be doing it. It's bad. Right. And if you get caught, it's even worse.
I got caught a couple of times.
So it's one of those things where now your association between something that should be pleasurable and something that should be just getting to know your body and all that kind of stuff is now riddled with fear, guilt, and shame.
Yep.
And so that energy would carry through into your relationships. And if you happen to stumble upon a woman who's highly intuitive and feels into her body, then they pick up on all of that, and you wonder why there's no sort of gel going on, or she can't open up to you, or she won't be as vulnerable or take your lead or anything like that, or you're attracting someone who's quite masculine in their demeanor and things like that, and they're more controlling and more domineering because you're exuding this sort of lower vibration, this low energy of guilt, fear, and shame.
Yeah. I think you've summed up my last 3 weeks there, Adrian. I love this podcast with people. They always bring up something I'm currently like sifting through, and sure enough, happens again for like the 72nd time.
Yeah.
I've got to reply to that because it's currently what I'm currently. Yeah, I'm just going to ponder that. Watch that seed. Well, you can watch that seed grow, man.
Yeah, we'll flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that, by the way. It's going to help a lot of men too. A lot of men listening to that.
Well, I think it's there's an interesting thing going on in relationships at the moment, and what I find is it's really perplexing because my view on, say, like what would you call like modern feminism these days, and what I've been noticing in the last like 10 or 15 years, and I've been saying it out loud for quite a while. And so for people that haven't listened to anything that I've said in the last 3 years, but particularly you can go back, and I used to say things to the tune of, I think that there's this push towards masculine, like is there such a word as masculinizing, like
Probably.
There's a lot of women that were embodying more of a masculine trait.
Yes.
Okay. And the thing that was an interesting observation was that women were admiring the masculine traits in other women. Like it was all the boss babe and the lady boss. And there was a coach I used to follow, and I still do from time to time. And it's interesting that she's changed her tune on a lot of this stuff as well. Her thing was like lady balls, and it was just like just fucking winning the day and all that kind of stuff. But it was a very masculine dynamic and a masculine energy to a lot of things that they were doing. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't do it or shouldn't be a boss or a leader or, you know, anything like that. But it was almost like what would today be called toxic masculinity was celebrated amongst other women. So they were like, you go, girl, you don't need a man, you can do it all on your own, you're leading the charge, you're a powerhouse, you know, you're a boss babe and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, all that kind of jazz. And I'm just, and again, I need to underline this with, there's nothing wrong with people, with women wanting to win in life, in business and career and all that kind of stuff. And it's not that they're not capable. Women are the most powerful people on the planet. Like you said before, they can give birth, for fuck's sake. Like, these guys are magicians, you know what I mean? Like, they can do things that men would never do. But what I think it did, it cultivated this energy of masculinity. And so then the kind of sensitive new age guy come into it, and the man was taught to not be as like overbearing and domineering and stoic and devoid of emotions and things like that. And so they kind of softened more into the feminine and sort of gave way to a lot of the let's support the women and you know, all those sorts of things. But I think what it led to in a relationship dynamic was a imbalance in who was controlling, who was more domineering, who was more subservient, you know, and that kind of flipped between the man and the woman, meaning the man was more of a people pleaser, more subservient, more of a order taker. And it was this whole, like, you know, I wear the pants in the house, she just tells me what size and what color to wear, right? And it's like I had to make if I wanted to go out with mates, I've got to get a hall pass first, right? I've got to get my passport signed by my missus before I am allowed to go out. So with this whole dynamic of they control everything, and I think what it bred within men was this more feminine, subservient, weaker, like pushover, people pleaser type of thing, and they lost their voice and their balls, really, like, to speak their mind and to articulate themselves in such a way that they could at least have their values and their boundaries set, and, you know, all those sorts of things. So it's interesting now to see that there's a polarity between this kind of stoic, like, I'm devoid of emotions and I don't let the emotions control my life, and I'm leading the charge and I'm doing whatever the fuck I like. But then also poo-pooing the woman who's who wants to have a career and a business, and they're saying, like, you know, I want to, yeah, a homemaker, someone who just wants to have babies and loves God, right? And so it's almost like the feminists of I don't know, the 1970s and 80s that were sort of saying, you know, men have been domineering and suppressing women for such a long time. It's flipped the coin. And you've got a lot of people and younger people, like in your age bracket, that are saying that it's kind of like the Andrew Tates of the world, you know, are kind of poo-pooing women who are ambitious. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So it's almost like they're a male feminist, you know. It's just I don't know how to explain it, but it's and I probably do a better job of it, but that's the interesting dynamic at play at the moment.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a call from the masculine to say, listen, I would love to have a more softer, approachable, feminine and girly, you know, woman in my life, and I want her to praise me and respect me and to take my lead and, you know, things like that. And I think from the feminine side, there is a desire for them to say, I really want a man who can make decisions and he's passionate about something and takes the lead in their role in life and is a great dad and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think that there is definitely a desire on both sides, but I still feel there's a real imbalance between what that actually represents, because the women on one side are being portrayed of like, you need to just listen to whatever the man says, and the men are like, no, you fucking take charge and you tell her what to do, and that kind of stuff. And if she doesn't listen, you kick her to the fucking curb. And it's just like it's kind of created more of a disparity instead of having an understanding of how that relational dynamic is at play. Like, you can be a boss babe and kill it at work, but when you come home, it's like, I think women have to have the ability to switch off, right? And the men have to have the same ability as well, because you go to work, you kill it, you're winning clients, you're recording podcasts, you're breaking through with people that you're trying to help in life and all that kind of stuff, and people praise you and admire you, and you've got all this social credit and all that kind of stuff. You've got a notoriety, so to speak, right? And so when you come home, but there's like things to do, like you've got to cook dinner and you've got to look after kids, and there's like chores and all those sorts of things. So there's a certain switch that I think everyone needs to be kind of malleable, but also have this intuitive ability to realize in what environment that I need to call into my masculine, and what environment I need to maybe soften and be more like easygoing and with the flow, and those sorts of things. And then from the feminine side, it's the same. It's like, yeah, I can be a manager, I can be a boss, I'm calling the shots at work, but when I come home, I kind of need to soften into this sort of more subservient and softer and beautiful and feminine and girly and all that kind of stuff. So we don't have two blokes at home, basically.
It's interesting because it's in all the movies and TV shows too, isn't it? Like you were talking about that hall pass stuff, and most of that programming is in the movies and the TV shows. Like you see the male wanting the hall pass, you see the male becoming weak. Like there's a full-blown assault on males right now, but I think there's a full-blown assault on all of us. But you see it in all the programming of the TV shows and the movies over the last 20 years, because they want to divide the family unit. And what you just said, spot on, because it's literally in everything at the moment.
Yeah.
That's people's perception of, like, they know how this part of the mind works. It's people's perception, so like they perceive that as normal inside their subconscious pathway, that they're going to go and act that out.
True. Look, you can take it a step further. So 100%, I think in the last 20, 30 years, the depiction of the male in sitcoms and in movies and things like that is like this sort of bumbling buffoon who's like fat and overweight and makes stupid mistakes, and the wife always comes in and has to solve all the problems, and she's really the brains behind everything. So there's that. I mean, there's sitcoms and things like that I can think of in terms of, say, The Big Bang Theory or Friends or whatever, and the males are typically out of work and struggling and all that kind of stuff, or they're sort of geeky and socially awkward, and they don't really earn that much money, but the women are sort of dominating and earning more money and those sorts of things. So certainly in Hollywood, it's kind of depicted as that sort of relationship dynamic. But then there's also like an interesting thing at play where there's an undertone of divide, right? Division and separation and segregation. So that is something that I think people need to be really aware of, is because when you look at the villainization of a man, you'll say, like, one lady made a comment on my social media the other day, and it was something to the tune of I can't remember what I posted, but she said, I wish that men would stop killing women, right? And I was like, oh, so you've been watching the news lately, and we had a bit of a to and fro, but it was the same thing. And someone come in and like another guy and said, Adrian, like, I think it's pretty well known out there that like men are more violent towards women. And so it was an interesting thing because, like, to my knowledge, when you look at, for example, abusive parents, like sexually abusive parents, it's 50-50. Right? So you've got something as a percentage, you've got like 15% of child sexual abuse is by two, mum and dad. And then there's like 40% and 40% mother and or the father. And then you've got someone that they know, like 5% of, some distant relative or someone that they've encountered, right? And so that's with sexual abuse. And then you've got a lot more men are committing suicide than women. And I think there's some statistic that is somewhere around 70 or 80% of men that kill themselves as a result of a relationship breakup, where there's a dynamic at play where perhaps the woman has taken a larger percentage of the settlement, or a larger percentage of looking after the children, those sorts of things. And so a man loses his will to live, literally, and kills himself as a result of all of that. So I think that there's a huge propaganda at play in terms of depicting the men as the violent oppressors, where it's clearly not that when you look at the statistics.
Makes sense, doesn't it? Because even in the last 3 years, it was a lot more males that were doing that than females in the last 3 years, even.
Yeah, look, I'm sure there'll be pushback in terms of, you can find stats anywhere to support, what you're saying and all the rest of it. But I really think that when you're at the grassroots and you're talking to other men and other women, like, and even from a definition perspective, like the last time I looked up toxic masculinity, the definition was something along the lines of a man who is misogynist and hates women and displays these aggressive traits and things like that. So then you type in, what does toxic femininity mean? And it was women who are negative and aggressive towards other women, right? So it's like a toxic masculinity was towards a woman, but toxic femininity was towards another woman, not a man. Like, it was almost biased towards the same gender. So, and I haven't done this in a while. I might have to go back and see if the definitions have changed, but that was my discovery.
Interesting. Confusion, isn't it? Like, doesn't make any sense.
Well, it doesn't. And also, like, when I'm working with a lot of my clients nowadays, like, I come from a business background. So a lot of my coaching career when I started was with marketing and business and all that sorts of things. So I've been in business for 20 years. So it's the thing that I know the most. But what I discovered through my own self-discovery, same as what you did, in terms of just things happen. And particularly in the last couple of years, like, we had time to pause and reflect and see whether our life was on the path that we thought it should be at that time. And in retrospect, you would look at it and ponder about, where my life's heading. And you're like, fuck, man, like, I'm on the wrong path and I need to change these things. And so the last 3 or 4 years has been more of a spiritual growth than anything. And you could argue that this is a spiritual war more than anything. And it's an assault on your soul. So that causes to kind of have a different perspective on where things go. But as a result of turning my coaching towards personal growth, I'm just talking to people all the time about what they desire and lack and have, particularly from a relationship perspective. And it's all the same. Like, people, you see this on the surface in terms of media. But when you ask a woman, what does she really desire in a man? It's all the toxic masculinity traits, like, bar a few, and bar being abusive and things like that. But they're like, I want someone who's in charge and takes the lead and makes decisions and, is in control of his life and all this kind of stuff. And then you ask a man, they're like, look, I just want someone who is a bit more like, softer and tender, and, you know, kind of just when I come home from a hard day's work, they're like, you know, pleasing to be around, and they're respectful, and they praise me for the things that they do, and they kind of like hold me in high regard. They have a reverence. You know, we have a reverence for each other. You know, we don't shitbag each other behind our backs and all that kind of stuff. We hold each other in high regard. We respect the role, and we kind of, you know, take on a certain level at certain times and certain dynamics of the household and things, but we also pitch in together, and we have a common ground. And I think, like, people just want to have aligned values. Like, that gets talked about a shit ton in my coaching, you know, and particularly when I say to someone, like, so what are your values? And then I get the fucking fluoride stare, you know, like there's just nothing. There's the deer in the headlights, right? And so you're like, okay, well, what about your husband, or what about your wife? Like, you know, what's her values? And then it's the same deal. It's like, Jesus Christ, you've been together for fucking, you know, 15 years or 20 years. You don't know each other's values, but that was me. So, like, I know this now, it's my first language. And so it's interesting to get into a relationship dynamic and talk about values and see whether you've got an alignment, you know, and then kind of have like a little like trial period of at least assessing, like, is this person congruent with their values? Is this person embody what they say, or are they just reading the books and spewing out some fucking dialogue to me, which sounds great, but then when we actually get into an argument or have a debate about things, or we're feeling triggered, how are we handling that situation? Are they emotionally mature enough to sort this out with me and not stonewall and project all of their wounds and all that kind of stuff? Or are they actually open to looking beneath the surface? And those, to me, like, that's the most exciting part of growth. Like, that's growth. And I think, like, maybe you'd agree or not, but I think as males, like, growth is a high value, right? Contribution is a high value, but personal growth, like not staying the same, is a high value of mine. Like, always improving is a high value. So if that's not embodied within a relationship dynamic, then you feel stale and stagnant. And anything that's stale and stagnant, it either gets shot in the fucking eyes, or it dies at, you know, a slow death. And so I really think that that's really at the core of what men and women desire. So what we're seeing from a media standpoint is the antagonist. It's the exact opposite of what is actually going on a grassroots level and playing out in relationships.
Awesome advice. it's just you're a very, very wise man, Adrian. You've sort of given me lots to ponder there, man. And I think a lot of men my age are listening, or a lot of men a bit older. You give me lots to ponder there, man. I don't really have a reply.
Thank you, mate. Well, look, you know, it's not that I'm wise. I've just done more stupid shit than what you've done.
No, I've done a lot of stupid shit too, but
learn from your mistakes, you know? So
yeah, you're right.
But I really think, you obviously strike me as someone who desires more in life, and you've come to this realization in the last few years that you've been living a lie, and there's a lot of part of your own persona which is a falsity, only because you've been trying to climb the ladder of success in whatever dynamic, only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. But the wrong wall is what society deems you should do. And now that you're leading from the front and saying, I'm going to be the author of my own story, and regardless of whatever comes my way, I'm just going to find the energy that, you know, suits my flow the best. And that comes with challenges, because all of a sudden you're left in a situation where you're lonely, right? And you're alone. So, like, you know, there's two different things. You can be lonely and you can be alone. But, you know, you're sort of trailblazing to a large degree, and you've got to leave a few things behind, and eventually you look behind you and there's no fucking person on the road with you. It's just you, until you catch up to someone who's like in the same lane.
100%.
Right. And so, and that seems to be what's happening with you in terms of a relationship dynamic, where you're gravitating towards people, or people are gravitating towards you. And all of a sudden the motivation is not because you just want to bone them. It's because, you know, like, you really want to genuinely cultivate an interesting relationship, which is a two-way street. And that's energy exchange is fair and even, and it's genuine.
Spot on. Yes. You completely hit that out of the park, mate. That's spot on to what has been going on with me. Yeah. And that's probably why we spoke today. But that's the thing. Like, I want that genuine human connection. And you're right. My, for a very long time, it was, wanting to do other things and not get to that deep connection. And it's like, now I have that deep connection with myself. It's like, well, it's like, I want that deep connection in my life as well, in terms of a female. Yeah. And I had to find that with myself first, though.
That's an excellent point. I remember when it wasn't too long ago, like we're talking the last 3 years, where I separated and I spent a lot of time on my own.
Yeah.
So a part of my internal kind of ways of thinking and feeling and acting out and all the rest of it was, I really didn't like to be on by myself. I even if I was just going for a coffee and I just felt like going to get some lunch or whatever, I would just ring around and invite people. And if they weren't available, I'd ring the next person and invite them. And it was just so I had someone to talk to and I could just be together. Like, why the fuck would you go on your own and have a coffee? So what I discovered in the last couple of years was that I spent a lot of time by myself and just got to understand what makes me think and tick and react, and some of the things that come up in me in terms of if I'm at a coffee shop and I'm by myself and I see other people that are together, and that whole kind of like thinking about what they're thinking on how I would be perceived, those sorts of things. And, I'm just a loser sitting in a cafe by myself and all that kind of jazz. But then on a deeper level, you're meditating and you're kind of dealing with those emotions of discovering who you are. And the net result is that you tend to fall in love with parts of yourself that you didn't realize you liked. And then you start really valuing your own time in your own space because it's important for you to recharge. So a lot of me was like trying to get energy from outside of me to feel like I was needed and wanted and belong to something. And now I have a huge desire to have that, but also have time to myself where I can recharge my batteries and be on my own and regenerate this machine. Right.
Super important.
And so you start to have a new profound view of who you are, and you start to think, this is what I like and this is the things that I want. So I don't want to change this. And what you're alluding to, as far as I can perceive, is you get to a point where you go, well, I like this version of Adrian, and this is the kind of life and lifestyle and the way that I want to conduct myself through life. But if I meet someone, I don't want to compromise that for the sake of being with someone else. So how do I not lose part of me and morph it into someone else because I just want to like them or I want them to like me? So then you start to become a little bit more like critical, and you're going through and analyzing a relationship with emotions, but also logic. So you're using that kind of analytical part and deciphering, like, where is this feeling coming from? Is this coming from something that was in the past? Is it a childhood wound? Is it a trauma that I experienced? Is it a part of me that I feel like I'm lacking? And you get to a point where you go, hang on a second, I am realizing in this moment, I am whole and complete as I am. And I love myself. And so if I'm ever going to compromise any of this, which I don't want to do, it needs to be with someone who also is whole and complete by themselves. And when we get together, we're complementary. I'm not with someone else because they fill a void within me. I'm with someone else because they complement and add to the awesome person that I already am. And so
100%.
that come from is such a different dynamic, because now you're like, well, listen, I want to be with you, but I have this thing where I need to be by myself and recharge my batteries. And that doesn't mean I don't love you. And it doesn't mean that I don't like you and don't want to be with you. It just means I need some time. And when that person respects that and says, well, that's totally fine, and they honor that part of you, now you've got this really beautiful flow that's going between two people. And it's the same in reverse. You know, what is something that is within them that is a part of their unique individual personality that you love and appreciate and admire in them. And you're like, I don't want you to lose that part of you now that we're together. Like, don't sacrifice those things because you're with me. Like, keep all of that, because that part of you I love, and that part of you I want for you. So it's just, I don't know, the come from is very, very different. And you have to love yourself first, because as soon as you realize your value, now you understand what you bring to the table. And then you can say, I want you to complement my life. There's no void to fill here, right? I'm whole and complete already. But I would love for you to add to my life and be a complementary to my life. And I think that's a beautiful dynamic to play in. That is a really lovely, juicy, awesome space, because now we're actually designing something. And that's creative, and that's creation. That's divine.
Powerful. It's yeah, spot on. And it's also too, like, the most time you spend with someone is with yourself. And it's like, get to know yourself on a really deep level, and and ask yourself those questions of, what do I want? What do I stand for? What are my values? How do I show up as a person, as a friend, as a partner, as all these things? Like, how do I show up as that, and what do I expect back? Yeah, powerful self-reflection, isn't it?
100%.
Give me lots to ponder today.
It's very good, man. I'm
That's
happy
the thing. In the last 3 years, I can relate to that too, because in the last pre-COVID stuff, like, I was always wanting to, I guess, run away and then hang out with other people. I never really want to spend time with myself. You're right. Over the last 3 years, I've spent so much time with myself to understand and to appreciate and to love me, for me, and the things that I used to do, and the things that I was about to do, and the things I was doing. Yeah, interesting self-reflection, because once you get to that moment where you can sit with yourself and understand, and you're right, just so you know where all these things come from. Like, then you're right about reaction and different things. Like, where does that come from? Is that a child? Is that a da-da-da-da? And you do that in a dialogue. It's so important, isn't it?
It's important, because when you understand how you operate, you've now got a handle on the manual, right? On your user's manual. And unfortunately, we've been taught by people who just knew the best, like they just did the best they could with what they knew. And so, but they didn't have the owner's manual either. And they were broken people and broken individuals as they were. And so we've modeled from really bad examples most of the time. You know, I can't say all the time, but for my personal experience, you're trying to emulate and model a great life based on a broken system or a broken depiction of what that is meant to be. So as soon as you start to really understand how you tick and operate, and it's even deeper than that, like you're saying, like, what's the genesis of these feelings and emotions? Like, am I desiring to be needed and loved in this moment? Do I want this affection and this attention because it serves us, meets a value of mine that was not met when I was younger? You know, what kind of wound am I opening up here by enabling this to keep repeating the same pattern? And in your work, like, of self-sabotage and things like that, you would have to embody this. This is your path, because you're dealing with individuals that are mostly not in a relationship dynamic and need to figure themselves out, because when they get into the big bad world, they're going to need to know who the fuck they are. Because if you don't, it's like you'll have no option but to be swallowed up by the system, because you have no idea about yourself. And so it's easy to gravitate towards some, false prophet that seems like they're going to be leading the way and telling you exactly how life is. And by human nature, we just conform to the masses. We look at the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
We look at what everyone else is doing, and we think, well, that must be the way to do things. You look at fashion and all those sorts of things. How does it work? It works because I see someone else doing it, and then I see a bunch of people doing it, and it must be the thing that we need to do. When you look at most people that are trailblazers and forging a new path, they're not actually going with the crowd at all. They're going against the crowd.
And that's something that I love doing now. It's like I love doing the complete opposite of what everyone else is doing. I used to always want to do everything else. I always wanted the new pair of shoes or the new whatever. It's like, I'll be that guy. I'll be that guy that's barefoot, that's got the shirt off, that's doing completely something different to what Tom, Dick, and Harry are doing. And I'm happy with that.
Great. As long as you're happy, man. That's the main thing. And I think people will gravitate towards that energy. So I think it's powerful. What's on the horizon for you? Where do you want to go with all this?
The podcast?
Yeah.
I want this to be I want to build my own little studio and have people come in, and I want this to be like a real professional thing.
That's awesome.
And I want it to be heard and seen around the world, which it already is, but more so.
The scale.
Yeah. And then my book as well. I've got a few book ideas. I'm not just going to, I've written a book already, be published soon. I'm writing a few more, and I really want to get this message out to as many people as possible. And that's my soul's journey. Yeah. There's a few more other ones, but for now it's just focusing on, getting this message out there, but not listening to too many people's messages. It's my message. So it's like, what is it I want to say, and what is it I want to write about? And then channeling that inner child that was told he shouldn't be writing about being a hero, channeling his energy to be like, well, my message is worthy. So what is it that I want to write about today? That's what my blogs are. I channel that little inner child that comes up, and his little energy there. And I'm like, well, I'll just write something deep today, and just feels like 20 minutes has gone by so fast because I'm just in that state of flow. It's powerful, man. I love writing. I used to always love writing, and I had a little child in a school the teacher told me I shouldn't be writing about being a hero. I should be writing about kicking goals after the siren and having the crowd cheering. I should be writing information reports and copying and handwriting, and I didn't want to do any of that shit. I wanted to write about fantasy stories and write comics and stuff, and I still have those, and I'm very grateful that I did keep them, because I went back to them and cropped that child and went, that's one person's perspective, bro. There's 6 billion people on this planet. Like, you're going to resonate with at least 50% of them, 60% of them, maybe even 20% of them. Even 20% of 6 billion is a lot of people. Even 5%. I just said to him, I said, mate, there's 6 billion people here. 6 billion. Someone's going to resonate with you.
100%.
Powerful, man. Good. But I've got some big dreams, big ambitions. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's actually not too far away from what you just mentioned. I've got a podcasting studio lined up, and I'm looking to put that together next year.
Same.
And so that's definitely something that I definitely want to, all I really want to do is coach and podcast,
Same,
so
yeah.
I'm running a few businesses at the moment, including coaching.
Yep.
And another little side hustle that I've started, and after the pandemic and stuff like that, as you know, but maybe some of your listeners don't, I lost big time. So it wasn't just personal and relational and all that kind of stuff. It was huge, financially. So I've learned that lesson now, and I need to grow and build something that is robust for anything else that may happen in the future and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really educating myself on certain things. Most of it is actually a lot of grinding, a lot of hustling. I need to get back to, I am getting back into putting a lot of my content into a package or a program that I can offer to people at a rate that personal coaching, like a lot of people are priced out of the market. And so I kind of want to demonetize to a degree to say there's information that I can learn. I can record it and put it into a program and duplicate that many times. So I don't need to charge the coaching rate that I would do when I'm working one-on-one with someone. So that ultimately is the end game, is to be doing that. And I'm really keen next year in 2024 to get into live events and workshops, because that is what I did pre-pandemic. So I was doing a workshop like one a month, and it was great. Like I love being in front of people, and I love that teaching dynamic where you're with someone and you can look into their eyes and you can see their changes in their body and all that kind of stuff, and you can affect something on them in real time. And so, but I'm really interested in now taking that spiritual aspect of it. So, large part of my coaching now, Nate, is like it's embodying every aspect of life, every domain of life. So when I'm working with people, it's like, yeah, it's not just good enough now to get your business and your career in check. It's important and imperative to get your mind and your body, and to get your health. And so, the things that I embody myself, like health and fitness and fasting and supplementation and business and mindset and all that kind of stuff is everything that I'm teaching my clients now. So I'm teaching them to embody that every dynamic of their life, because I want them to be great mums and dads. I want them to be awesome husbands and wives, and I want them to be great partners. And I also want them to kill it at business and life and, all those sorts of things.
100%.
And so, I feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense where the more and more I help people achieve that, the more and more it helps me. And so that's where I want to go.
Interesting you say workshops. I'm looking at, if anyone on the sunny coast is a parent, has a kid in a school, I'm looking at putting my program in a couple of schools up here to run workshops in them and do a talk at assemblies and different things. So I'm looking at doing that next year too.
Nice. Yeah, that's so good. A buddy of mine, Luke Kennedy, he does a really great talk about empowerment and all that kind of stuff. He's got a great story. There's a couple of podcasts I've done with him, and he does that around Australia, but I think it's mostly around New South Wales, and he teaches speaks to schools all the time. So he'd be worth connecting with.
I think I might have to talk to you off air and get an email or something, and I'll shoot him off an email, I think.
100%.
Sounds like, yeah. You're a good man, Adrian. Thanks for the chat today. We went deep as per.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it was good.
I'm glad to be here, mate. Anytime you want to catch up, I think.
I'm already keen for part 3 now.
Good.
All right. Well, this has been the Breaking Free podcast and conversations with Adrian. This has been absolutely incredible. I've got lots of stuff to ponder today. Adrian, thanks for coming on. That was really awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. It's a pleasure, and I'm really happy to see you thriving and
thanks, man.
Moving ahead in business. It's awesome.
If there's one takeaway for people today, what would be your message to sum all this up, and then we'll.
That's a good question. I think everything that we talked about so far is really your relationship to self. So, like, the relationship that you have with yourself predicates all other relationships. And I think that is a dynamic that, if you feel like there's unrest within you at the moment, individually and in around your life, whether it be with other people, with your work colleagues, whether it be with your husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, or just where you feel like you're not in tune with where you are at this present moment, it's here. That's the problem. The bottleneck is right here. And so I think, yeah, that would be the take home for sure. You work on yourself and everything else will fall into line.
100%. Well said. You're a good man, Adrian. Very, very grateful to have listened to that episode with Jason. Very grateful to have interviewed you and call you a friend now. It's awesome, man. Thanks so much. You're a wealth of knowledge, mate. It's
Thank
awesome.
you, bud.
All right, we'll talk soon. Cheers.